My father said it the way he used to say pass the salt. Your sister owes $240,000. And you're going to pay it. Not a question. Not even really a statement addressed to me. The way you'd address something to a person whose answer you weren't sure of. It was a verdict delivered to someone who had already been convicted in a room they weren't invited into. I was just there to be informed. It was a Sunday afternoon in January. The kind of January that Indianapolis does without apology, flat and gray and cold, in a way that doesn't bite you so much as just press down on everything, steadily, like it has all the time in the world. My parents' kitchen smelled like the pot roast my mother had made for a lunch none of us had eaten. The food was still on the stove. My coat was still on. I had been in the house for 11 minutes. My father sat across from me at the table. My mother sat at the end of it, closer to him than to me. Her hands were in her lap, both of them, and she was looking at them the way you look at something that tells you what you need to know, but that you're hoping, if you keep looking, will somehow say something different. I noticed that about her hands. I filed it away. I would come back to it later. Kayla's business failed. My father continued. There are creditors. There are accounts, some of them have your name on them, from when you co-signed that loan 4 years ago. He paused. Not the pause of someone uncertain, the pause of someone who has organized his points in advance and is moving through them. The way I see it, this is a family matter. We handle it as a family. You pay it, we put it behind us, and that's the end of it. I looked at him. Then I looked at my mother. She was still looking at her hands. I said, "How long have you known?" My father's jaw tightened. He said, "That's not the point right now. It's the point I'm asking about." He said, "Megan, just my name. The way parents say your name when they're deciding whether to engage or to simply repeat the thing they already said." My mother did not move. I said, "How long, Mom?" She finally looked up. There was something in her face that was not quite guilt and not quite fear, but that lived in the same neighborhood as both of them. She opened her mouth. Then she closed it. She looked at my father. That was all I needed. I had been in a lot of difficult conversations in my 34 years. I had sat across from managers who told me the project had gone wrong, across from doctors who told me things I did not want to hear, across from friends who had finally decided to say the hard thing they'd been carrying for months. You learn to read what a room is actually doing versus what it says it's doing. This room was not having a difficult conversation. This room had already made a decision about me, in my absence, and had invited me over to be told. My father said, "You're going to pay it, or you're no longer our child." That's where we are. There are moments in your life where you expect yourself to do one thing, and then you do something else entirely. I had imagined, in a general way, that if someone ever said something like that to me, I would cry, or argue, or say all the things I had been holding back for years. I had imagined volume, and tears, and the particular exhaustion of trying to make someone understand something they have already decided not to understand. I did not do any of that. I looked at my father, then at my mother. She had gone back to looking at her hands. I said, "Then I'm not." I stood up. I got my keys from the table. I picked up my coat, which I had never taken off, and which now struck me as a kind of accidental wisdom. I walked out of the kitchen, through the living room, past the family photos on the wall, Kayla's school portrait, my school portrait, the 4 of us at some Christmas I couldn't place, and out the front door. I did not slam it. There was no satisfaction in slamming it. The drive home took 14 minutes on a Sunday afternoon. My hands were steady on the wheel, which surprised me. The radio was off. The heater clicked on when I started the car, and then slowly found its rhythm, and I drove through the gray Indianapolis streets, thinking about nothing in particular, which is sometimes what the brain does when it is absorbing something too large to process while also navigating traffic. I got inside my condo. I hung up my coat. I went to the kitchen and stood at the counter for a moment without turning on any lights. And then I sat down on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet and I cried for 12 minutes. I know it was 12 minutes because I was watching the clock on the microwave from where I sat. I'm not sure why. I think I needed something to measure. When the 12 minutes were up, I got off the floor. I washed my face at the kitchen sink. I made a cup of coffee, which was not something I actually wanted, but which gave my hands something to do. Then I sat down at my kitchen table. My kitchen table, not my parents', not a place where verdicts were handed down to me, opened my laptop, and typed 2 words into the search bar. Credit report. The results came back in seconds. I had a monitoring service. I had always had a monitoring service, because I had always been the kind of person who paid attention to things like that. I clicked through to my full report. The system pulled the data. The number at the top of the page stopped me. I set down my coffee cup, carefully, the way you set something down when you don't quite trust your hands. It was not the number I expected. It was not, in fact, a number I could have expected. It was not a number that happened by accident, or by the ordinary attrition of a difficult year, or by any single cause a person could point to and say, that, right there, that is what did this. This was a different kind of number. I stared at it for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called Diane. The number at the top of the credit report was 193 points lower than it had been 3 months ago. 193 points. In 3 months. That is not a number that accumulates. That is not the gradual erosion of a late payment here, a high balance there, the ordinary friction of a busy life. A credit score does not drop 193 points because you forgot to pay a parking ticket. It drops that way because something has gone wrong at a structural level, something foundational, something that a single cause cannot explain. I poured the coffee I had made down the drain and started a new pot. Then I sat back down with my laptop and began going through the report line by line. There were accounts I recognized, my mortgage, my car loan, paid off 18 months ago, and still sitting there like a good memory. 2 credit cards I had opened myself, both with low balances because I had always paid more than the minimum. Always, because that was the kind of person I was, the kind of person who read the statements, who tracked the balances, who knew where her money went and why. Then there were accounts I did not recognize. The first was a business line of credit. The institution's name was unfamiliar. The balance was listed at $87,000. I looked at the opening date, 3 years ago. My SSN was listed as primary borrower. I sat very still. I thought about 4 years ago. The living room of my parents' house, which smells like the same carpet cleaner it has smelled like since 1994. Kayla sitting across from me, her hair done, her energy the particular kind of brightness she could turn on when she wanted something, the kind that made you feel like you were the only person in the room who mattered. She had printed out a business plan, 18 pages, spiral bound. There was a logo, a spa, she said, in Broad Ripple, which is the part of Indianapolis where the young and optimistic go to open things. She had already found a space. She had already talked to a contractor. What she did not have was a credit history sufficient to get a business loan. My father said, just cosign, a formality, $45,000. If she makes her payments, which she will, look at her, look at this plan. She is so serious about this, you'll never even know you signed anything, and if the worst happens, which it won't, we'll figure it out as a family. I said yes. I looked at the loan documents. I saw the amount, $45,000. My name in the cosigner line, Kayla's name in the borrower line. I asked for a copy. My father said of course. I drove home and waited for the copy to arrive. It never did, and I told myself I would follow up. And then I did not follow up, because I was busy, and because I trusted them, and because trusting your family is not supposed to be the thing that ruins you. I came back to the present, to the number on my screen. The loan I had agreed to co-sign was $45,000. The account in front of me showed $87,000, a refinancing I had never authorized, documents I had never signed, or had not knowingly signed, or, and here was where the thought became something I was not quite ready to complete, had not signed at all. I scrolled down. A second account. Another institution. Business line of credit. Balance. $61,000. My SSN listed as primary borrower. No record of Kayla's name anywhere in the summary. Opening date. 2.5 years ago. A third. $34,000. Same profile. Then a personal credit card. The kind that sends you a card in a standard envelope and requires nothing more than a name, an address, a date of birth, a social security number, all of which my sister had, all of which she had acquired in the most ordinary way possible by being my sister. Balance on the card, $58,000. The card had been open for 2 years. I had never held it in my hands. I had never activated it. I had never, in any moment I could locate in my memory, agreed to it. I added the numbers. Then I added them again. I am a marketing manager by profession, not an accountant, but I can add. The total came to the same place both times. $240,000. I sat at my kitchen table in the dark for a while. I did not turn on the lights. There was enough light from the laptop screen. Outside, a car went by, its headlights sliding across the ceiling. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed. Ordinary sounds from an ordinary Sunday evening in the apartment of a woman who was sitting in the dark, learning that the life she thought she had built had a different shape than she believed. The feeling was not rage, not yet. It was something that did not have a name. Something that sat in the chest like a stone put there quietly, without announcement, and that you only notice when you try to breathe normally and find that you can't quite do it. I picked up my phone. I called Diane. She answered on the second ring. I said, "I need to tell you something." She said, "Okay, just that." Just the space she always made without being asked to make it. I told her. All of it. The kitchen table, my father's verdict, my mother's hands, the credit report, the accounts, the numbers. I told her without crying, which surprised me. But perhaps there is only a certain quantity of crying a person can do in one evening, and I had used my 12 minutes. Diane listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I have always valued about her, the understanding that some things need to be said before they need to be responded to. When I finished, she said, "I'm coming over." She arrived 40 minutes later with a bag of Thai food that neither of us was going to eat, and I had used those 40 minutes to print the credit report on my home printer, all 14 pages of it, and to set it on the kitchen table under the overhead light. Diane sat down across from me. She went through the pages slowly, the way she goes through everything, without rushing, without performing concern. I watched her face as she read. It is a face that is very difficult to read, which is part of what makes her good at her job, and it told me very little until she set the last page down. She looked at the accounts, she looked at the dates, she looked at the column where borrower information was listed, and the column where my SSN appeared. Then she looked at me. She said, "Megan, this is not a co-signing problem." Diane said, "Tell me what this looks like from the outside." "So I did," I said. Someone had access to my personal information. My social security number, my date of birth, my address history, my signature, at least a sample of it. That access came through the original loan 4 years ago, the one I agreed to, the one I signed with my own hand and watched my father put in a folder. After that loan was processed, someone used that information to do several other things. To refinance the original loan without my authorization. To open new lines of credit in my name at institutions I had never walked into. To apply for a credit card that arrived at an address that was not mine and was activated by a hand that was not mine. Diane listened. When I stopped, she said, "How many people had access to all of that information at once?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. While Diane talked asking the methodical questions she asks when she is working out a problem, the kind of questions that come from 11 years in HR and a fundamental belief that information, properly organized, will eventually tell you what you need to know, I found myself somewhere else. Not gone from the kitchen, not absent from the conversation, but pulled, sideways, into something that kept surfacing the more I tried to look at what was in front of me. I was 16. It was my birthday. My parents' house, the same carpet, the same light through the kitchen window. My father had a ribbon around something he was carrying in from the car, and for a moment, arriving home from school with my backpack still on, I thought the thing with the ribbon was for me. It was a Saturday. My birthday was a Saturday that year. It was a bike, blue, with silver handlebars. He carried it through the front door and set it in the living room, and Kayla, who was 13, and had not yet learned to hide her pleasure at getting things, made a sound that I still remember somewhere between a gasp and a laugh. I stood in the doorway with my backpack on. My father looked at me. He said, "Your sister asked for it." Then, as if this completed a thought I had started, "You don't need it. You always figure things out." He was not cruel when he said it. That is the part I have spent years trying to explain to people who ask. He was not trying to wound me. He genuinely believed it was a compliment. You are capable. You are self-sufficient. You do not require the same maintenance as your sister. He was proud of me when he said it. That was what made it so complete. I got a card. The card had a $20 bill in it. I thanked them both. I went upstairs and sat on my bed with my backpack still on and understood. In the specific and wordless way that adolescents understand things before they have the language to name them, that being the one who figures things out was not going to be the same as being the one who was thought about. Diane said, "Megan, I came back. The kitchen. The 14 pages. The overhead light." She said, "What you're describing isn't a mistake someone made. That's a decision someone made. Multiple times, over multiple years. With your name." She said it simply, the way she says everything important not to land it, not to make sure I felt it, just because it was the accurate way to describe what she saw in those 14 pages. I heard it land anyway. I heard it the way you hear something that rearranges the furniture in a room you've been sitting in for a long time. I said, "I know." She stayed until midnight. We did not eat the Thai food. We drank the coffee I made, 2 pots of it, and we went through the documents again, and at some point, she started helping me organize them by date and institution, because that is what she does. She makes the overwhelming manageable by giving it a structure. When she left, she hugged me at the door and said, "Call me tomorrow." I said I would. I did not sleep much. In the morning I went to work because there was a campaign brief due by noon, and because I did not yet know what else to do with a Tuesday, and because the rhythm of ordinary things can hold you when your mind needs somewhere to be that is not inside what you discovered the night before. I answered emails. I sat in the 9 o'clock marketing meeting and contributed 2 ideas, both of which were well received, and I looked at the faces of the people around the conference table and thought, none of them know that I am sitting here with $240,000 in fraudulent debt attached to my name and a family who has decided that the correct response to this is for me to pay it quietly and not make things difficult. I looked normal. I have always been very good at looking normal. After the meeting, I made a call from my car in the parking garage. I had found the name of a consumer fraud attorney the night before, while Diane and I were organizing the documents. I had written the number on a sticky note and put it in my coat pocket and tried not to think about what calling it would mean. I called it. A woman answered. I said I needed an appointment as soon as possible. She said Thursday at 2. I said, "I'll be there." I did not tell my parents. I did not tell Kayla, who had sent 3 more text messages since Sunday that I had not opened. I put my phone in the glove compartment and went back inside and finished the campaign brief. On Thursday, the attorney's name was Barrett. He had an office on Meridian Street with a window that looked out over a parking lot and a desk that was covered in a way that suggested he was a person who knew where everything was, even if no one else could tell. He reviewed the documents I brought in a green folder, all 14 pages, organized by Diane's system, with the dates highlighted. He did not rush. He did not ask unnecessary questions. When he finished, he set the pages down and folded his hands on the desk. He said, "Some of these signatures are forgeries." He said it the first time and then, a moment later, without drama, as if making sure the word had been received. "Forgeries." He let that sit. Then he said, "There's enough here to file a criminal complaint, but I need you to understand something before we talk about next steps." He looked at me steadily. The way people look at you when what they are about to say is not something they want you to miss. Once we file, you cannot take it back. My father called 3 times on Tuesday. My sister called 4 times on Wednesday, and then, when I didn't answer, sent a text that said, "I know you're upset, but please just call me back. We can figure this out." I read the text in the parking garage after work, standing between my car and the car next to it, and then I put my phone face down in my bag and drove home. I was not ignoring them out of anger. Or not only out of anger, I was ignoring them because I was working. Barrett had given me a list of what he needed. Every piece of paper related to the original loan 4 years ago. Every statement I could access for the fraudulent accounts, any written or text communication from family members referencing the debt or the accounts, and a written timeline of everything I could remember, in order with dates where I had them. I spent Tuesday and Wednesday evenings at my kitchen table with the 14 pages and a legal pad and my laptop, building the file Barrett had asked for. Diane came over on Tuesday and helped me organize the statements into chronological order, and she did not say anything that wasn't useful, which is one of the reasons I have kept her in my life for 7 years. The file grew. The more I organized it, the more it told me. Not in ways I hadn't suspected I had suspected all of it by now, but in the specific, irrefutable way that documentation tells you things. Dates, amounts, addresses. The address of record on the fraudulent credit card was my parents' house. The phone number of record on the refinance loan was a number I didn't recognize, but that I would later learn was a prepaid phone. The signature on the refinancing application was mine, in the general way that a copy of a thing is the thing close enough to pass a cursory review, different enough, once you knew to look, that a trained eye would see it immediately. Barrett had seen it immediately. He had used the word twice. On Wednesday evening, at 20 minutes past 6, my building's intercom buzzed. I almost didn't answer it. Then I looked at the camera screen and saw my mother in the lobby, in her winter coat, her handbag over her arm, her face doing the thing it does when she is trying to look composed and is not quite managing it. I pressed the button. I said, "Come up." I opened the door before she knocked. She stepped inside and looked around my apartment the way she always does when she visits. A quick scan that I think is genuinely unconscious, checking that everything is clean, that there are no signs of disorder. There were, however, 14 pages of credit report and a legal pad with 2 days of notes on my kitchen table, and her eyes went there and stayed there for a moment before she looked at me. She said, "Can we sit down?" We sat. She sat where Diane had sat. I sat across from her. She said what I expected her to say, because I had been her daughter for 34 years, and I knew how she built arguments. She said, "Family first." She said, Kayla had made mistakes, but she was still family, and family did not let each other go through things alone. She said, "Your father isn't sleeping." She said, "This is going to hurt everyone if you keep going the way you're going." She said, "Can we please just sit down and talk this through, all of us together, and find a way forward that doesn't end with someone getting destroyed?" She said all of it with genuine distress. I want to be accurate about that. My mother was not performing. She was frightened. And the fear was real. And somewhere inside it, there was also, I think, love. The particular love of a person who cannot imagine choosing between her children, and so has, without quite admitting it to herself, already chosen. I let her finish. Then I said, "Mom, how long have you known?" She opened her mouth. Then she closed it. Her eyes moved to the window over my shoulder, the one that looks out over the parking lot, where the lights were coming on in the January dark. She was looking for something out there. "I don't think she found it," I said. "Not about the original loan. I know you knew about that. I mean the rest of it, the refinancing, the other accounts. How long?" Her hands, which had been folded on the table, came apart. She pressed one of them flat against the wood, and then the other. Her face was doing something complicated, and I watched it, and I understood that what I was watching was a person trying to find a version of the truth that was easier to say than the version that was actually true. She didn't find it. The silence stretched out between us, and it told me everything the silence in my parents' kitchen had told me on Sunday, and everything I had already known before I asked the question. I said, "I need you to leave," she cried in the hallway. I could hear it through the door, not loudly, just the particular sound of someone who had held something together for longer than they should have and had run out of the energy to keep doing it. I stood on my side of the door and listened to it until it stopped. And then I listened to her footsteps going down the hall, and then I listened to the elevator. Then the building was quiet. I walked to the living room. I did not turn on any lights. I sat down on the couch, not curled up, not folded in on myself. Just sat. The way you sit when you are very tired, and the tiredness has gone past the point of feeling like anything in particular. Outside the window, the city made its ordinary noises, a siren somewhere, going the other direction, the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, the particular silence that an apartment makes when it is just yours. The television screen was dark. My reflection in it was faint, barely there. More suggestion than image. A woman on a couch in an unlit room. I looked at her for a long time. I have been afraid of this image for most of my life. Not this specific image, not this couch, this window, this particular January dark, but this shape of things. Alone, no family in the next room, no one whose feelings I was currently managing, or whose needs I was currently accounting for. I had been taught, in the slow and wordless way that families teach things, that this was the consequence of being difficult. the cost of not cooperating. If you do not give people what they need, you will end up sitting by yourself in the dark, and you will have done that to yourself. I sat in the dark and waited for it to feel like what I had always been told it would feel like. It didn't. What it felt like was quiet. The first real quiet I could remember having in a very long time. Not the quiet of nothing happening, but the quiet of not having to be anything in particular for anyone. Not in this moment, not in this room, my apartment, my couch, my reflection in a dark screen, looking back at me. I picked up my phone. I called Barrett. When he answered, I said, "What do we file first?" Diane left at midnight on Sunday. I walked her to the door and watched her go down the hallway, and I stood there for a moment after the elevator closed, listening to the building settle around me, and then I went back inside and did not go to bed. I called my bank that night. I want to be precise about this, because precision is what that phone call required, and precision is what it got. I sat at my kitchen table at 12:20 in the morning, with the 14 pages still spread in front of me, and I called the fraud department number I had looked up, while Diane and I were organizing the documents. A representative answered on the fourth ring, Marcus. He said his name was, and I wrote it down on my legal pad with the time and the date, because I had been taking notes in documented conversations since I was 22 years old, and I was not going to stop now. I told Marcus what I had found. I read him the account numbers from the credit report, the institutions, the opening dates. He walked me through the process of placing a security freeze on my credit file with all three bureaus: Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, which would prevent any new credit from being opened in my name while the dispute was active. He gave me 3 case numbers, 1 per bureau. I wrote all of them down. He told me someone from the fraud investigation team would be in contact within 48 business hours. I wrote down 48 business hours and circled it. I hung up at 1:14 in the morning. Then I opened my laptop and went back through the credit report one more time because I needed to understand the timeline before Barrett and I could talk about next steps. I built a spreadsheet: account name, institution, opening date, balance, address of record, contact number of record. 6 columns, 7 rows. When I was finished, the spreadsheet told a story that was cleaner and more legible than the 14 pages had been, because a spreadsheet does not have context or emotion. It only has what it has. I printed it. I added it to the folder. I went to bed at 2:30 and was awake again at 5:15, which is not unusual for me when something is wrong, so I made coffee and went over the timeline again until it was time to go to work. Day 2 was Barrett. His office on Meridian Street, the window over the parking lot, the desk that only he could navigate. I brought the folder, the 14 pages, Diane's organization, my spreadsheet, the legal pad with Marcus's name, and the 3 case numbers, and the circled 48 business hours. Barrett looked at all of it. He did not say that I had done well, or that I had been thorough, which I appreciated, because I did not need to be told that, and he seemed to understand that. He filed a formal complaint with the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department that afternoon. He also sent certified letters to all 4 creditors informing them that the accounts in question were under fraud dispute and that all collection activity was to be suspended pending investigation. He gave me copies of everything. I added them to the folder. Day 3, the creditors moved. The way Barrett explained it later, and the way I have understood it since. When a fraud dispute is filed and certified letters arrive, institutions begin the process of verifying the original account information. One of the creditors, the one carrying the largest business line of credit, had the address of my parents' house as the address of record. When they attempted to verify by mail and phone, they reached that address. My father answered the phone. Barrett told me about this at 4:30 on Wednesday afternoon. The same evening, Sandra would arrive at my door. I had not yet spoken to my parents. I did not know, until Barrett's call, that they had spoken to the creditor. My father called me 12 times in the 3 hours between his call with the creditor and Sandra's arrival at my building. I watched the calls come in from the parking garage at work, my phone face up on the passenger seat, his name appearing and disappearing on the screen. I did not answer any of them, not because I had decided not to, but because Barrett had been clear. Until the complaint was formally processed, I was not to discuss the case with anyone who might be named in it. My father had been named in the documentation as a known contact in connection with the original loan. I was not ignoring him. I was following instructions. Day 4. Barrett called at 9 in the morning. He said, "The police report has been flagged." He let a pause happen. "Given the use of SSN across multiple financial institutions and the geographic scope of the accounts, they're referring it. You're going to be contacted by the FBI Financial Crimes Division." I was in my car, in my apartment building's garage, where I had been sitting for 6 minutes because I had not quite been able to make myself go inside yet. I said, "Okay," Barrett said. "This changes the nature of the case. Federal jurisdiction operates differently than local. The process will move at its own pace, and there are things that will be out of both our hands. But I want you to understand what this means in practical terms." Another pause. "No one can make this go away quietly. Not you, not me, not your family. Once federal investigators open a case, the case belongs to them," I said. "I understand." I stayed in my car after I hung up. Outside, someone drove past, looking for a space. A door opened and closed somewhere above me in the structure. The garage lights hummed at their particular low frequency, the way they always do, indifferent to everything. The thing I kept thinking about was not Kayla. It was not my parents. It was the conversation I had with my father at my parents' kitchen table. His voice, the particular flatness of it, the absolute certainty that what he was asking me to do was reasonable. $45,000 had become $87,000, had become $240,000, and somewhere in the space of those 4 years, in all the refinancing and the new accounts and the forged signatures and the prepaid phone number listed as a contact on documents I had never seen, somewhere in all of that, my father had looked at the situation and decided that the correct response was to call me to a Sunday lunch and tell me to pay it. And my mother had sat with her hands in her lap and not said a word. I opened my phone. I went to the Notes app. I started a new note. At the top, I typed 3 lines. What I know. What I can prove. What I need. I had been in a defensive position since Sunday, discovering, documenting, waiting for other people to make their next move. That was over now. I had a case number. I had a federal referral. I had a folder with 14 pages and a spreadsheet and 3 certified letters, and the name Marcus and 48 business hours circled in ink. I was not reacting anymore. That evening, at 6:47, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize, Indianapolis area code, but not a number in my contacts. I answered it. A voice said, "Is this Megan Carter?" I said, "Yes." She said, "This is Special Agent Torres, FBI Financial Crimes. I'd like to schedule a time to talk." Day 5. The FBI field office in Indianapolis is on North Pennsylvania Street, in a building that is deliberately unremarkable, the kind of building designed to look like it could be anything, which is itself a kind of statement. I had never been inside one before. I sat in a waiting area with a row of chairs bolted to the wall, and a window at the reception desk made of glass thick enough that I could see the shape of the woman behind it, but not her expression, and I thought about how many people had sat in this same row of chairs waiting for conversations they had not expected to be having. Torres came out at 2 minutes past the appointment time, which I noted not because it mattered, but because I was still noting everything. She was shorter than I had expected from her voice, with the kind of precise posture that comes from years of moving through spaces where you need to be taken seriously. She shook my hand. She led me back to a room that had a table and 2 chairs and nothing on the walls. The meeting was 40 minutes. I will not reconstruct all of it, because most of it was procedural, what the investigation would involve, what timeline was realistic, what I should and should not say publicly about the case while it was active. Torres did not make promises. She gave me a case number, a direct line, and a folder of information about what to expect when a federal fraud investigation proceeds. She spoke the way people speak when they have had this conversation many times and understand that clarity is a form of respect. At the end of it, I asked, "What do I need to do to support the investigation?" She told me. I took notes. I have asked for help throughout my professional life, asked for resources, asked for extensions, asked for input on problems I couldn't solve alone. But there is a particular texture to asking for help with something that is happening to you, personally. Something that has to do with who you are and what has been done to your name. I had always found that kind of asking difficult. It required admitting that you had been in a position to be harmed. It required letting someone else see the size of what had happened. I asked anyway, Torres answered. I left with the folder under my arm and drove back to the office and made it in time for a 3 o'clock call. Day 5, evening. A friend of mine, a woman named Clara, who had known both Kayla and me since our mid-20s, who occupied that particular social position of being close to both sides of a divided family without being allied with, either sent me a text at 7 in the evening. It said, "Kayla asked me to reach out. She's really scared. She wants to talk to you. She says it's all a misunderstanding and she needs a chance to explain." I read it twice. Then I put my phone down and made dinner. I did not respond to Clara. I did not respond to Kayla, whose name I had not seen in the text, but whose voice I could hear in every word of it, the particular framing of all a misunderstanding, and a chance to explain, and especially really scared, which is the vocabulary of someone who has learned that vulnerability, performed at the right moment, is its own kind of leverage. I ate dinner. I washed the dish. I went to bed at a reasonable hour and slept better than I had since Sunday. Day 6. My father called at 10 in the morning. I almost didn't answer. Then I did, because I wanted to hear what his voice sounded like on the other side of 5 days. It was different. The word I keep coming back to is smaller, not in volume but in weight. The quality of certainty that had been in it on Sunday, the flatness of a man delivering information he considered settled, was gone. What was in its place was something I did not have a name for immediately. It took me a few seconds of listening to identify it. He said, "Megan, I'd like for us to meet and talk this through. As a family. Just to talk," I said. "There's nothing to talk through, Dad. The process is moving." He said, "Please," one word. I had heard my father say please many times over the course of my life at dinner tables, in hardware stores, in conversations with strangers where courtesy required it. I do not think I had ever heard him say it to me the way he said it that morning. Not as a courtesy. As a request from a person who understood that the answer might be no, I said, "I'll let Barrett know you reached out." I hung up. Barrett sent a certified letter to Kayla at her home address that afternoon. The letter was 2 pages. Its essential content was simple. She was not to contact Megan Carter directly or indirectly, not to contact Megan's employer, and not to contact any financial institution that Megan had a relationship with, pending the resolution of the federal investigation. Violation of the terms of the letter would be documented and reported. Barrett sent me a copy. I added it to the folder. Day 7 morning. Kayla had been making minimum payments on the fraudulent accounts through a separate bank account that was in her own name, a fact Barrett's review of the original creditor documents had surfaced. When the accounts were flagged as disputed and frozen, the automatic payments she had set up stopped processing. 3 accounts went simultaneously delinquent that morning, the first business day after the freeze fully cleared. Delinquency notifications went to the addresses of record for each account. 2 of those addresses were my parents' house. I learned about this from Barrett, who learned it from a creditor liaison who called his office to ask about the status of the dispute. By the time Barrett relayed it to me, my father had already called me twice more that morning. I had not answered. I called Diane instead. She answered in the middle of what sounded like her lunch break, a background of other people's conversations and the particular ambient noise of a downtown restaurant. She said, "How are you doing? Actually." It is the actually that matters when Diane asks that question. She is distinguishing between the version of the answer that is meant for general consumption and the version that is true. I thought about it for a moment, which is the correct response to an actually question. I said, "I'm okay. I think I'm okay." She said, "Yeah?" I said, "Yeah." There was a pause in which I could hear her doing something with a fork. She said, "Good." That was all. We talked for another 10 minutes about something unrelated, a reorganization at her company, a television show she had started watching. When we hung up, I sat for a moment in my car, in the parking garage where I had taken the call, and I held on to that good for a moment, the uncomplicated weight of it, before I went back inside. Day 7, afternoon. I was at my desk finishing a media plan when my phone buzzed with a notification from my building's front desk. I had set it up years ago, a text alert, whenever someone was in the lobby asking to come up. It was a convenience feature I had never thought much about. I thought about it now. The notification said there were visitors asking for my unit. I called the desk. The attendant, a college student named Jerome, who worked Mondays and Thursdays, and who had always been polite in the way of someone who has decided that politeness costs him nothing, told me there were 5 people in the lobby. 5, I said. Can you describe them? He did. An older man, an older woman, a younger woman who had been crying, a man with the younger woman who was holding her arm, an older woman, different from the first, who had said she was there to help. I knew all 5 of them. I said, "Send them up." I opened the door before they knocked. They were standing in the hallway in the configuration that people stand in when they have arrived somewhere together, but are not entirely sure they should have Kayla at the front, Derek just behind her with one hand at the small of her back, my father to the left, my mother behind him, and Aunt Patricia at the edge of the group, the way people stand when they have come to help and are already regretting it. 5 people in the hallway of a building they had never been to, in a city they only visited when the occasion required it, in January, at a time of day when none of them would otherwise be here. I looked at them. They looked at me. I did not move out of the doorway. I did not say, "Come in." Not immediately. And no one moved forward. We stood there for a moment, me on one side of the threshold, all 5 of them on the other, and I understood that this was a moment I had spent a very long time being afraid of. It was not what I had expected. I stepped back. I let them in. Kayla started talking before she was fully through the door. She had been crying recently, the particular redness around the eyes that stays for a while after the crying stops, and she had the look of someone who had been rehearsing what to say, but whose rehearsal was disintegrating in real time. The words came fast. She said, "Misunderstanding." She said, "Mistake." She said, "I never meant for it to get this far." She said, "I thought I could fix it before anyone found out. I thought the business was going to turn around. I thought there was time." She said, "I know this looks bad, but I need you to hear what actually happened." She talked for a while. I let her. My Aunt Patricia said, when Kayla paused for breath, "What we're all hoping is that we can sit down and work through this together. As a family, there are options here that don't have to end the way things are going." My father said, "Whatever you need to make this right, Megan, we'll find a way to do it. All of us together." He looked at me the way he had not looked at me on Sunday, not from the position of someone issuing a verdict, but from the position of someone who understood, perhaps for the first time, that verdicts could be issued in the other direction as well. "Just tell us what you need." My mother stood behind him and did not speak. I waited until the room had gone quiet. This took longer than one might expect. Kayla filled silence reflexively, the way some people do, and Patricia was trying to hold open a space for negotiation that was already closed, and my father had more he wanted to say. I waited for all of it to run out. When it did, I said, "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it clearly." The hallway, they were all still standing. None of them had sat down. I had not offered them anywhere to sit, went quiet. I said, 3 days ago, the case was referred to the FBI Financial Crimes Division. I have already met with an agent. I have already provided all of my documentation. The case has a federal case number and a federal investigator assigned to it. Kayla made a sound. I continued, "A federal fraud investigation is not a personal dispute. It does not work the way this is working right now, with 5 people in a hallway asking me to reconsider. The decision about how to proceed doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to the federal system. I cannot call Agent Torres and tell her I've changed my mind, because that's not how federal investigations work, and because I haven't changed my mind." I paused. "Let that land." "Too late," I said, "is not a threat. It is a fact." What happened next happened in stages, the way things collapse when they have been held up for a long time by a structure that was never as solid as it appeared. Kayla sat down on my hallway floor. Not dramatically, not a collapse so much as a giving way, the way a person sits down when their legs have simply stopped cooperating. Derek went down with her, one knee on the floor, his hand on her back. She made the sound I had heard through the door on Wednesday evening, when Sandra had stood in the same hallway and cried, but different. Sandra's crying had been the sound of someone who had held something together and run out of energy. Kayla's was something raw, the sound of someone who had been running hard for 4 years and had hit a wall and was now on the other side of the wall with nothing left to run on. My father sat down, not on the floor. At first he leaned against the wall, and then his legs went the way Kayla's had, and he sat down on the floor of my hallway with his back against the wall and his face in his hands. He was 63 years old. He had worked in the same manufacturing facility for 27 years before it closed. He had built a deck on the back of their house with his own hands over the summer I was 12. I had never, in my life, seen him sit on a floor. Patricia said something. I don't remember what it was. It was the kind of thing people say when they have run out of the language for what is actually happening. Then my mother spoke. She was still standing. Her hands, which had been at her sides, moved not to reach for anyone, just to move. The way hands move when the person they belong to is trying to find the right shape for what they're about to say. She looked at me, just me, not at my father or Kayla or Patricia, and her voice was very quiet. She said, I should have told you. 2 years ago, when I found out about the refinancing, I knew it wasn't right. I knew what she had done, and I told myself it wasn't that serious. I told myself she was going to pay it back. I told myself she stopped. Started again, more slowly. I should have told you. I'm sorry. I looked at my mother. I believed her. I want to be precise about that because I think it matters. I believed that she was sorry. I believed that she had known and had chosen not to tell me, and had spent 2 years living with that choice, and that the sorry she was saying now was not a performance. It was real. It did not change anything. I said, I know. Then I said, I need you all to go now. No one argued. That was the thing I had not anticipated that when it came to it. With the case number and the federal referral and the folder Barrett had built and the sound of Kayla on my floor, there would be nothing left to argue with. Patricia helped Kayla up. Derek kept his hand on her back. My father got to his feet slowly, with the deliberateness of someone whose body has become heavier in the last 10 minutes. My mother looked at me once more briefly and then looked away. They went into the hallway. I waited until they were all through the door, and then I said nothing further, and I closed it. I stood on my side of the door in the quiet. Then I slid down until I was sitting on the floor, back against the door, the way I had sat on my kitchen floor 7 days ago after driving home from my parents' house with steady hands and a chest that hadn't yet understood what had just happened. 7 days ago, I had sat on that floor and cried for 12 minutes and watched the clock. I did not cry this time. I sat in the quiet and breathed. And the quiet was the same quiet it had been all week mine. Just mine, the quiet of an apartment where the only person whose feelings I was accountable for was the person sitting on the floor. I stayed there for a while. Then I got up. 6 months later, I can tell you how it ended. Or how it ended so far, which is the more accurate way to say it. Because some things do not have endings so much as they have the point at which you stop looking at them every day. Kayla pled guilty to 2 federal fraud charges. The original complaint had named 5. The plea agreement brought it down to 2, which is how plea agreements tend to work, which Barrett had explained to me in advance, so that I would not experience it as a defeat when it happened. It was not a defeat. It was the system doing what systems do, processing, negotiating, arriving at an outcome that no one is entirely satisfied with and everyone can live with. The fraudulent accounts were discharged from my name over the course of 4 months. This required more documentation than I had imagined: possible letters, affidavits, certified mail to 7 different institutions, a form that had to be notarized and then submitted to 2 different agencies, and a follow-up process that Barrett managed with the same organized patience he brought to everything. When it was finally complete, my credit score was 11 points higher than it had been before any of this started. I find that fact absurd in the way that only true things can be. My parents still live in the house in Indianapolis where I grew up, in the same neighborhood, on the same street. I speak to them, not often, not at length, not with the ease that I think I once hoped would eventually develop between us if I just kept showing up and being reliable and giving them enough time to see me properly. That ease did not develop. I have stopped waiting for it. What we have instead is a relationship that is honest about its own limits, which is smaller than what I wanted and more sustainable than what we had before, and which I find, when I examine it carefully, that I prefer to the alternative. Kayla and I have not spoken. I do not know if we will. I carry that open question the way you carry something that belongs to a future version of yourself, not refusing to look at it, not avoiding it, just understanding that the answer is not available yet, and that requiring it prematurely would only produce a false one. Diane takes me to brunch on the first Saturday of every month, at a place in Fountain Square that has good eggs and bad parking, and a server who has worked there long enough to know our order. Diane argues every time about the tip percentage, not because she is unwilling to tip well, but because she believes the calculation proposed by the bill is mathematically inaccurate, and she intends to make that point regardless of whether anyone is interested in hearing it. She is exactly who she has always been. I am aware of what a particular kind of gift that is. It is a Saturday morning now, in January again. The light that comes through the window over my kitchen sink in January is pale and very honest. The kind of light that doesn't flatter anything but makes everything look exactly like itself. I am at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee. There is nowhere I need to be for the next 3 hours. There is no one whose mood I am tracking, no one whose reaction I am pre-calculating, no one in the next room whose feelings constitute a weather system I need to prepare for. I am at my kitchen table. It is mine. Someone asked me, not long ago, whether I was angry. It was a person who knew the general outline of what had happened, not every detail, not the spreadsheet or the case number or the certified letters, just the shape of it, and who was trying, I think, to understand how a person gets through something like this without it leaving a mark. I thought about the question for a while before I answered, which is what the question deserved. I told them I was free. They looked at me the way people look at you when the answer you've given is not the answer that fits the shape of the question they asked. They said they didn't understand the difference. I didn't explain it, not because I couldn't, but because I've learned that some things don't translate well into explanation, that the experience of them is the only proof that the thing is real, and that trying to describe the experience to someone who hasn't had it is like trying to describe a color. You can say the words. The words are not the color. What I could have told them, if I had wanted to try, that anger is still looking at the thing that hurt you, still in relationship with it, still letting it occupy the center of the frame. That freedom is not the absence of what happened, but the absence of what happened as the primary fact of your life. That you can know something fully, every detail, every account number, every forgery, every Sunday afternoon in a kitchen in January, and not have it be the loudest thing in the room anymore. That I called my bank that night because I had stopped waiting for someone else to handle it. That I filed the complaint because the alternative was to be someone who knew a crime had been committed against her, and chose silence anyway, which would have made me into a version of the thing I was most afraid of becoming. That I said too late because it was. That I got up off the floor. I am not the same person I was in my parents' kitchen on that Sunday. I am not sure I could find my way back to her even if I wanted to. She spent 34 years believing that the most reliable path to being loved was to need nothing and ask for nothing and handle everything and stay. I stayed for a very long time. The coffee is warm, the light through the window is what it is. Outside, someone's dog is barking at something, and a car backs out of a space, and the ordinary machinery of a Saturday morning runs without requiring anything from me. I pick up the mug with both hands. I stay here. If you have ever been the responsible one, the one who figured things out, the one who never asked for too much, the one the family quietly counted on without ever saying so out loud, then you already know something Megan had to learn the hard way. Being reliable is not the same as being safe. The people who depend on your reliability are not always the same people who will protect it. What Megan's story teaches us is specific and practical. Your name on a document is your legal responsibility, regardless of who asked you to sign it or how much you trusted them. Co-signing is not a favor. It is a financial commitment with real consequences. And the moment you discover those consequences have been expanded without your knowledge, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to report it immediately and let the system do what it was designed to do. There is nothing cruel about protecting yourself from a crime. There is nothing disloyal about telling the truth. The harder lesson lives underneath the legal one. It is this: the people who love you do not need to borrow your name. They do not need your silence. They do not need you to pay for what they broke. Have you ever been asked to cover for someone in your family at a cost that only you understood? Have you ever said yes when everything in you was saying no because you believed that was what love required? If Megan's story sounds familiar, you are not alone. And if it sounds like something you're still living, it is not too late to make a different choice.